Yeah, I was gonna even set this up so you could even share it, but it's not set up correctly right now. So what's going on? We'll have to do that next time. So
Yeah, man.
let's just continue with where we were. I don't care about on my channel. We could start mid combo, and anyone who watches can just catch up with us.
Nice, man. Yeah.
But yeah, what were you saying about conspiracy now?
Yeah, I think they use conspiracy theories as a form of cognitive warfare. Essentially, it's to not all conspiracy theories are created equally. So I if you prime someone with the notion that potentially everything in the in the environment is phony or fake, which of course is true in that sense, but what you do is you bring them into a state of pure confoundment and confusion, wherein they can be more easily um, led and steered to
Yeah,
certain conclusions and such. So it makes them very much culturally and mentally malleable
yeah,
to
yeah,
alternative weaponized alt media narratives that are put out there by the system itself.
yeah. And now it's like I mean, basically they've just made a new mainstream media through conspiracy. And now it's conspiratainment, conspiracy culture, which they can control probably easier than even the old media. Because at this point, they could put out anything they want, say anything they want, and get enough people to behind it with just grassroots type of. You don't even need that much money to start a campaign online like that. You need really nothing for free.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's really quite ingenious what they've done, because under the guise of the internet, they and also what the internet provides, such as I guess an actual free press, or what appears to be a free press. They have essentially democratized what appears to be the press, but in fact they've democratized the 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 expediting of weaponized narratives vis-a-vis this sort of this alternative media, this internet free press, if you will, this democratization of journalism. So that you're starting to see this more and more with the likes of the TikTok education era, and you're getting some very, very peculiar and strange memes really that are becoming literal urban fact, not even urban myth. They're becoming
Yeah,
urban fact, and beliefs that are just simply touted as true, but they're not necessarily. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of truth to the idea of Tartaria, but Tartaria is that was not a real place. That is a it's a it's a designation for the Tartars.
hmm,
Tartary was just a general geographical expanse. It was never necessarily um
like
a
a
term.
kingdom.
Yeah, it wasn't an endonym, meaning there was no group called the Tartars that
Yeah,
named themselves the Tartars. It was simply just an exonym, typically designated to the likes of Mongols and Kipchaks and Cumans and Pechenegs, those sort of steppe nomads, and that's just simply taken on a life of its own, pretty much, just because of the vagueness of the term, and the vagueness of the history surrounding Tartary and the Tartars, you know. So yeah,
yeah, and almost makes you think had they done the same thing, they could have done the same exact thing once before because then you could, if you just switch what you're saying to Atlantis and switch the way that they might have mixed up media, and instead of it being like the old way media was to then television, did they
yeah,
do the same exact thing already once? And how would we know? It's like we're in another iteration of an iteration of an iteration, and this can just continue forever.
Well, see, that's what I think they're discoloring and they're discrediting with the likes of Tartaria in that theory. Because, for example, well, I'll give you a for instance. This is how absurd the sort of Tartaria theory is, and the various branches from it. Um, on extremely old churches in this country, you'll have you'll have slots, and they're usually fitted in with iron that surrounds it, embraces it, and within these slots, you know, it was typically used for datum points or levels, and there was an old, I forget what the name of the measurement tool is, but you'd fit the measurement tool in the slot, and it would allow you to take a sort of datum point, a measurement from that base, from that slot, from the level of the slot, which was a predetermined level. That allowed them, obviously, when they were building it, and of course, in sort of primitive times, they could take topographical uh, sort of surveys based upon these landmarks. So they're to do with levels. However, according to the Tartaria theorists, these are actually sort of plug-in old slots for plugging in.
Oh, okay. I know exactly.
For bananas and things like
Yeah,
that.
I
Yeah,
know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah, so I mean, there's going to be a bunch of things like that. Then they're going to be repurposing for to be nonsense that people complain about, do nothing about,
yeah.
except complain about, and ultimately, where's it going to get us? It's going to get people. People are just going to keep talking and talking and talking, and then even when they go, if they try to do something about it, what they're doing will be absolutely nonsensical.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's the rabbit hole theory essentially. You just keep them chasing their own tail. You keep them chasing the white rabbit down that endless rabbit hole, and they'll again. You don't have to give them much. See with any form of disinformation campaign, you give them a little sort of nugget. They'll take that. They'll sort of digest it as a sort of hive mind, and then they'll simply just formulate their own weaponized, well, not even weaponized, their own misinformation. Essentially, it's user generated misinformation. That's what alternative media is all about. In fact, that's what Facebook and a lot of the DARPA LifeLog stuff was all about. It was about
Yeah.
user generated misinformation and user generated content, because it allowed the intelligence agencies um, to reduce the resources that they were inputting into the control of society. You basically got the users to not only generate the information that you required on them, um, just well, I guess in a manner that was passive, if you will, and it also allowed them to generate their own user-generated misinformation. So,
And then you add
yeah.
to that like the websites like creepypasta. What's the other one? Like the is it? I want to say it's like S&P, or what's the one
Mm,
with the all those like
uh,
ARGs on it that people write? Like it's like science fiction ARGs. It's just nonstop stories that they treat like they're actual like case files. Like they treat them like they're actual case files,
yeah.
and it's all science fiction.
Well,
So
see,
basically,
jump in, Chris. Sorry, I
I
interrupted
was
you
just
there.
going to say, basically, you get like the fears of everyone projected too, without them even needing to create any sort of like, if you want to do like a scare campaign,
Exactly, exactly.
you don't even need to come up with an original idea because they've given you all the ideas you need. Here,
Yeah,
I'm gonna invite Ronan in too.
brilliant, man.
Let
Yeah,
him
and,
join us.
and furthermore as well, they've also primed themselves for the fantastical with these things. And you saw the same thing with radio, and people had primed themselves previous to, a lot of the UFO nonsense. I mean, not all of it was nonsense, but a great deal of it was. And of course, it was planted there by the government. It was a psychological warfare experiment. But people had primed themselves because with radio, there was a lot of fantastical things in the early days of radio. Again, user generated content as well, right? It was a piece of telecommunication technology that permitted the democratization of information.
Yeah.
And so,
Well,
so of
right
course,
when you say that, I think War of the Worlds. I mean, and look,
exactly.
you could
Yeah.
see how that played out.
Yeah, that was another primer, another social primer.
Yeah, yeah. It's like the game. It's like their game. It's gamification of everything because
Exactly.
it's turning everything into an ARG, almost like an alternative reality or a mixed reality game.
That's exactly it, yeah. They establish the virtual reality. So it's the simulation. The subject has to believe that they are part of the simulation. By doing that, the, well, firstly, you allow them the belief that they're creating their own simulation, or they have some sort of co-creative capacity within the simulation. This allows them to become, more engrossed in it. It's
Yeah,
similar to like Skyrim, right? Of course, Skyrim is a completely linear story from start to finish, but the game design and of course the narrative design, it it allows the illusion to be crafted throughout that entire experience. Really, any experience, right? Even you could even look to the likes of any RPG, Daggerfall, all the old ones in the 90s. They're all linear, but they give the illusion of non-linearity, meaning that there's emergent narrative and emergent gameplay by the subject, but ultimately it means nothing in the grand scheme of things because the game has been designed from point A to point B, right, from
yeah,
the
yeah.
beginning to the end.
So there's always going to be the same ending for pretty much everyone. Just how you get there is going to be determined by the user instead of, and it's going to be shaped by the creators and coders of the game, but it's going to
Yeah,
be then like shaped in part by the user. So there's less. It's less of a story that needs to be written in between.
exactly. Yeah, it's the same with AI.
Well,
You're
that's what
not.
I was gonna say. For them to be now letting things get as crazy as they are, they have to have an AI that they trust in place to where it can do the things they need it to do. Because if you're by doing this, you're also like by spreading the nonsense, you're also making it so that like we were like like when you mentioned the Tartarian narratives around power and like the plugs that people think are like power plugs, but they're really not for that. People who would have originally had an idea to actually invent something using actual physics, those ideas are gone now. So you need a system that actually knows how to create. So you need something in
Mhm.
place because you're not going to have a population that knows how to do anything except tell
Yeah.
fairy tales.
Yes. Well, it's you need the artificial intelligence because you've essentially diminished the intelligence of the population. And you'll notice that, see, most systems throughout history, most systems, though they may feign it, they are completely anti-creative because when you get true creativity within a system, that tends to upend the status quo. So you need this. Well, you have it today in our contemporary world. Progressivism, and the progressivist. All of it is essentially fake. It's consumeristic. It's packaged. Um, all the revolutions of as well are televised. They're all packaged as well. So it's essentially it never upends the status quo. But like Saturnalia, um, it's a formalized form of subversion that's created by the system itself, ironically, to defend the system by venting the anger periodically, ritualistically, in a prescribed and formalized and controlled setting within the population to vent that angst and anger and perhaps that creative impulse. Another thing is AI, what you're seeing with Google's VEO3. I mean, that will also generate the fantastical and prime people for that. and it will also get rid of their sort of creative impulse, because
Yeah.
you're just prompting the AI to do it for you. And of course, the AI feigns creativity, but essentially it's just a stochastic parrot. It's an advanced form of plagiarism at this point in time, at least.
Yeah, and speaking of parroting, actually, me and Mystic Ronin were talking about this last night. The positives and negatives of parroting narratives. Well, I mean, we actually, I think we came to the conclusion that parroting or being around someone who's positive and reflecting that is more of a frequency based thing and not a parroting necessarily. But what's going on, Ronin?
Hey guys, greetings. What's going on? It's a true honor to share space with you guys and Silas. I don't think we've had the opportunity as until
Yeah,
now.
you guys need to talk.
No, we haven't. No, it's nice to meet you, man.
Yeah, gratitude. I want to share something in relation, not necessarily the realm's programmability, but one kind of more on the surface. There was a underground movie called The Jones Plantation. I believe it came out last year.
Yeah, I've heard of it, and I know exactly which one you're talking about.
Yeah, so it's great in terms in relation to what you guys are talking about. Essentially, it's okay. There are slaves on a plantation. Like, hey guys, that's enough. Literal slaves working, right? Sleeping, eating, and short story long, someone comes around and goes, "Hey, okay, you're all free, right? And by the way, here you know now you have to work and pay for your room and board. Oh, and by the way, and you can use our stores. Oh, by the way, here's like plantation money to use. You could buy whatever you want.
Yeah,
So, oh, and you get to vote also, right?
and don't they vote on the actual plantation owner as being like he's one of the people who might be like the head of the plantation or this little community that they're now whatever they're calling
Oh yeah,
it, Jonestown, and or is it or the other guy I think was the head. He was like the manager of the plantation beforehand.
sure. They gave him two choices,
Yeah,
right? But in the end, their lives never changed. They still worked. They still got room and board. They just had to pay for it. It was just a repackaging of the slave system.
yeah, and the guy who sold them out too and taught the plantation owner how to do it was one of their own people.
Yep,
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah,
So that's just a re-imaging of the same enslavement with the illusion of one having the freedom of choice and control over their existence when really they're just slaves just as much as before, but now they believe they're free, which is a pretty good way to run a bunch of slaves, having a bunch of slaves run around believing they're free. So what Silas was saying, it kind of reminded me of that. Um,
absolutely. Silas, have you seen that? Do you know the movie he's talking about?
No, but I just looked up there, and yeah, the former slave saying, "Yeah, you're all free now." It's similar to what occurred with feudalism. So the transition from feudalism to capitalism, you saw the same thing. What they found was, and again, this was over, basically hundreds of years studying the population. They figured out that if you give the serf, well, firstly, if you rebrand the serf as the citizen, and then you give them the choice of what profession they want to do, basically upon the plantation, that they will actually generate greater yields of productivity.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
you
and
know,
it reminded me, Silas, of what you were also talking about, where they kind of will allow the serfs to have that pressure relief valve where they'll be able to, revolt and burn stuff down and be angry. And then the guys just go, okay. And then they repackage that into, some other form of feudalism. And it seems like the serfs, like, we won and we got something, a different thing going on, but the controllers stay the same. So they allow that pressure valve, um, that destruction and anger and unjust righteous, and, and
The pharmacos as well with the scapegoat ritual. I mean, which is odd because that then does actually like, because then you have the revelation. You have them warning about the pharmacos, warning about the scapegoat, right in the book, which is like why that is almost the oddest part of that book, that they leave that in there for everyone to see. But I guess, I mean, how many things do they put in everyone's face for everyone to see? And it's also been misinterpreted so many times that it's usually taken to be like pharmaceuticals, when I think it's probably multi-layered.
oh yeah, and again, and then you have that Palantir coming around that database, and everyone will be tagged and traced. It's for their safety, and that's very dystopian. Like that takes you into very, very sci-fi movie stuff. That's coming evidently soon, this year maybe. At least here in America, and then you remove all that whole borders and sovereign stuff and country stuff, and that's where you get into that kind of one world database government, and no constitutions or charters. They'll all be, you can't have that in that style of system. So that's
I would argue they're probably going to keep the illusion of borders, but it won't be like anything like the way we see it now. It will be more of like a.
Well, you won't be able to travel. You'll need permission. You won't be able to travel outside of your zone without permission. Yeah. There'll be no. You'll have. Yes, everything you type on the internet, take a picture, everything you say, everywhere you walk is all going to be scrutinized and saved in a database. This is them. This is not even making up stuff. So then living in that world, I mean, people are going to want to play video games and be on drugs. And that's what exactly. They say. Harari, the Harari people say.
Harari man. I swear, I think he is Ari man at this point.
Yeah, I mean, he's wild. So that's very real, man. So, and the problem is that everyone is so been conditioned that predictive all the things, open laboratory psychology that people have, the mass hypnosis that everyone has been involved in are just been prepped for this time now. So it's and then soul and your spirit being connected to a oneness, that's going to be very interesting how that plays out with those that want to be connected with some sort of not necessarily physical material thing, some higher connection, however anyone wants to put it. And then, man, because the realm's changed, and will you even be able to connect with the oneness, or will that be decimated because of their experiments and their various spraying? Like, and you try and sit to connect, and you might literally be disconnected. That's their goal anyway. So I don't. It's interesting to see how that plays out. So go ahead, Silas. Sorry, I was thinking as I was talking. So yeah.
No, you're totally on point. With the Internet of all things, that sort of grand database, and they've even been talking about this with the likes of the biodigital convergence and wide body area networks and all of these interconnected ideas, basically leading back to Harari's vision of the Internet of all things, where the biological systems of man and of course the mind itself, you see that with Elon Musk's Neuralink, and of course all of that's still primitive, but they're working their way to it, where essentially we have this greater connectivity from our biological systems with telecommunication devices which of course are all controlled from the data centers, because ultimately, if you were to, it's not necessarily the device they control. It's the device as a node within the informational river, if you will. And then, of course, all the currents are heading downstream to the data centers. This is why they're building mass amounts of data centers. But they're still ironing out the kinks in their system, because, again, if you're to create that sort of system where you're disempowering the population. So this is why they're getting rid of internal combustion engines, and essentially everything is going electrical, because if you put everything electrical, it has to go into the grid. And of course, if it has to go into the grid, electrical generation outside of the grid structure, and you have to be connected to the grid to thus access the data, and the informational stream from the telecommunication devices, which will be integral to shop, to to rent. Well, everything will be rented essentially, but all of your basic amenities, to gain access to that, you'll have to be on that system. So even the cars as well, you'll notice with the modern cars, and I'm starting to see this with the new generations of electric vehicles, there's no handles on them. A lot of
Yeah,
them, it's
yeah.
biometric, or it'll be like a sort of button that's pressed, and of course that goes through a sort of check system with the computer on board in the car. That's because they're prepping these EVs and
Well,
that system for the sort of mass rent economy. You'll own nothing, you'll be happy. That idea.
do you guys have the self-driving vehicles out by all yet? Where you
Uh,
both of you are living? Yeah,
we,
could
we
we?
we have them, but it's only in the sort of upper class areas of Edinburgh that can afford them or are using them right now. The sort of hipster
That's
areas.
strange that they did upper class. So out here, they started in lower class areas, like in
Really?
the poorer areas, and now they're around here where I am, and they just drive around literally all day, pretty much. If I don't think I've ever seen anyone in one of them, maybe once. And then when they're not at night, when they're not driving around, they're just parked, idling on the side of the road. And the whole time you could tell that because at first I thought these were mapping vehicles used by like Google Maps, because they have a similar sort of camera system on the top of it. So that means, I'm guessing, that the whole time they're driving around, it's like a dual use system at that point. They're driving people around, they're getting data off the
Yeah,
people, and they're also taking
yeah.
nonstop imagery with their cameras for the system.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the issue as well. See, when you look at all of this technology that's deployed, and it quite literally is deployed, because the government. See, this is the thing about systems of government. The system of government is essentially a strategic military doctrine on how to subjugate and annex the domestic population. The government itself is essentially detached from the people. The people are the targets of their application of their military doctrine, which they may call, I don't know, a political ideology, or a governmental system, or whatever. Essentially, that's a military doctrine. So all of these technologies that they're putting in place, like any technology, it is weaponized first. Its first usage, first and foremost, is militaristic. And of course, all of these things, like what you're saying, they're reconnaissance vehicles, they're
Yeah.
drones. Um, it's a system, a labyrinthian system, to protect the inner core of power, because, like any system of power, you leave it alone long enough, it will just try and centralize all power onto itself, and it'll find weird and wonderful ways to do that. AI, or you know whatever it may be, whatever they're cooking up at CERN as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it'll do anything to maintain its power. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm convinced it's, oh man, there's so many cameras on these driverless cars and they just drive in patterns all day. And I'm sure they all have their own little grids and they just watch everything. They're watching what everyone's doing, getting profiles on whoever they can. And then their drivers, Jesus, they're probably even more profiled than the people around them who aren't using these cars yet, but they're not going to give people a choice eventually. It's just going to be like the same way, like the image I shared with everyone on Telegram the other day from the airport. How there were 3 different cameras, 3 different gates that you had to either opt out of, which with a person who wasn't there. So you had to call the person over, or you would just have to do it. So they're going to make it very inconvenient for you to get an alternative option eventually.
Yeah, yeah, it's and also as well at the same time, you have all of this double speak where, for example, they may talk about inclusion and progress and all of these buzzwords, but they do the exact opposite. So fundamentally, the governments themselves, they don't care, they don't want social cohesion. What they want is they want a system of complete and utter chaos where people are just constantly infighting and these divides and fault lines are either created or they're galvanized, they're antagonized within the system as well. So it's everything you're seeing. It's funneling you down a certain path. It's corralling you, and it's like a psychological funnel. And they will, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but in this case, the road to hell is paved with double speak. So anything that they say, they typically do the exact opposite when you actually put on paper what it is they're actively engaged in, whatever policy it may be, right? Even with the technology, I mean AI. There's nothing about that's progress. Essentially, what you're seeing is right now, and again, we haven't got to AGI or the singularity point yet, where AI is at the point where it can literally create, it can engage in scientific research and, of course, AI research. So we don't know. All we have right now is sort of generative AI, and it has a generalized quote quote intelligence, but
Yeah, at least that's all we have publicly.
That's all we have publicly. Yeah. But ultimately, it's just plagiarism. So it's there is no progress with that. You couldn't create anything new. You're just going to get the same old. Well, it's like a circular trap essentially. But that's how they want it, because that's the type of system they want. Power wants to maintain everything sort of circling the drain perpetually. That's it's the homeostatic model. It's what the cyberneticists were talking about in the 40s. This system of autopoiesis, where and negentropy, where you negate entropy, you negate decay within the system by maintaining this self-regulating system that is in just it doesn't have to progress, it doesn't have to advance, it doesn't have to even be habitable for humans. It just has to maintain itself without non-cohesion creeping in, without entropy creeping in. I mean, ultimately, that's all they care about. And you're seeing it. The modern West is, in the next 10 years, it probably will be the most unequal society that has ever been. It's a fact. It's just the trajectory of finance, of economics, and all of that. It's a completely unequal system. Don't get me wrong. I mean, China's pretty much up there too.
Well, yeah, they're pretty much they're just slightly ahead of everyone with that.
Yeah.
I was actually going to share an image because when you were discussing the way everything funnels, I have that image from the Dark Doorway of the Beast book by Garrett Hewison May with the foreword by Kenneth Grant, where he discusses the funnel effect. And I think it's a good, I love that image because it's such a good representation of the way they create reality through these gamified narratives. Let me see if I can find it.
So back, let's rewind in a little bit. When you think of these, this is just an example, the term redneck, right? It's demonized, right? You think stupid, whatever. So in the 1880s, well, up until like about 1890-ish, they had the Battle of Blair Mountain in West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And the short story long, you can look it up. It's an amazing story. There were, like, to use the so-called white, and there was so-called black, and there were Italian immigrants. They all came off and went to West Virginia to work in the coal mines, and it was really bad conditions. And so if they complained, they got kicked off. You know, this is West Virginia. You're living in tents, and you have families, and you get kicked off. And the people that kicked them off were the like mercenaries hired by the corporations who later became the FBI. So the corporate, and then so the people, the workers decided to fight back, and they all put on handkerchiefs, red handkerchiefs, and they started to win the day. You know, they took over this machine gun and turned it around and started to win. So the corporations called the U.S. government in D.C. So the Army at the time and the Air Force at the time came to be peacekeepers. And who do you think they started bombing and shooting? They started shooting the rednecks. Now the rednecks won that day, but that's just an example. And of course, that now their term, which West Virginians speak of this in with pride because they know the history. And this is not just a bunch of white dudes; it's a mix of people. And of course, the culture creators, you know, they can't have that. So they, you know, that's why you demonize words like, just to use an example, rednecks, right? To that actually push back. They don't like that. And also in that same area, the Hatfield and McCoys, the McCoys were not a family. That again was that mercenary. It's like in the Pinkertons and all those people that you see in movies. Those are the predecessors of the FBI. They were corporate hired mercenaries. That's where the FBI comes from. So they work for the corporations. So you have on top of this when people, and those that don't know, you know, they go, yeah, dumb red. They just go along with the culture creation. It reminds me of, I think it was 2020 also. I was driving, sitting at a light, and this dude's making a right, and it's fine. He's a black dude, and he just gives me the finger as he's driving by. I was like, what's the point of that? He's a grown man. He wasn't a kid. I give kids a pass. He was a grown man. And I was like, oh, that's an indicator that they are full on puppets. They have given by the culture creators, the fourth branch, which is all the same people that you guys are talking about. They receive the information and the actions to take. They are full on Hegelian dialectic, recipients. And that's where we are. So when we, or some of us try to go, hey, I'm just going to go off the grid Amish style. I'm just going to grow my own food and go that style. That's why they demonize, they demonize the prohibition was not for drinking alcohol. It was for against whiskey cars. Just look up images of whiskey cars and things like that. The alcohol was fuel, like ethanol. Anyone can make it in their backyard. So all of that it was specific tasks and agendas that needed to be accomplished by them to get to where we are now today. So if you do that, hey, I'm just going to do off the grid, grow my own stuff, I'll make my own clothes, then they'll probably come up with some sort of word that can ridicule you, and most will join in on that. So sorry if that was long-winded, but I just want to share a little some ways that they got here. You know.
Yeah,
An-
yeah. Good. So
Another when you were mentioning the Battle of Blair Mountain, that reminded me of Shays Rebellion, which was just after I think it was 1796, 1797. It was just after the Treaty of Paris in 1792, which formally ended the American War of Independence. And of course, it saw America recognized by Britain and, of course, France and a few other European nations. And eventually that grew as time went on.
Oh,
But
and so okay, hold on, silent before I forget.
Mhm.
So all of the things when you talk about the savages, right? The Indians, the red, or the rednecks, or the, this and that, the pals of today over there. It's you have to create the campaign of dehumanizing them, to where they're savages. They're beheading people. Oh, the Mayans or whoever, the Aztecs are beheading people, and the Indians are savages and they scalp you. The Germans make lampshades out of whatever. All this stuff. It's to dehumanize them and then justify the massacre, the violence. So go ahead, Silas. I just wanted to say that before I forgot.
No, absolutely, yeah. They did the same thing. I'm pretty sure in Shays Rebellion, a lot of there were several political cartoons, and actually, no, it was 1786. Sorry, that's when it was. But yeah, it was the same idea, where they simply just looked at these people as rustic yokels and things such as that. Again, dehumanizing them and completely destroying and undermining, at least in a propagandistic sense, their, well, really, it was with Shays Rebellion, same with Blair Mountain. It's always about the, the working man is he receives little from the corporations for his, for his toil and his labor. And yeah, it's, this is a story as old as time itself, but yeah, you're totally correct. It's they dehumanize the other and then they justify the massacre that way.
Yeah,
Because
and the thing now is, if you criticize anything just with rational, the label that you could receive in modern day that's equivalent to all that would be like racist or something, which is the worst thing ever. So if you're a racist, oh my gosh, that's justifiable to harm a person, just labeling them. And you're like, hey, dude, I just asked a simple
yeah,
question.
yeah.
I was like, what's with these self-driving cars? And they're like, you're right. What? How did we get from there to here? What are we doing? And it's, dude, like you're saying, it's the playbook is as old as time. But I'm always like, hey man, it's working. So why change the playbook? It seems to be working in a dark way,
Yeah, and I'd like to add that it's not just about the dehumanizing it's not just about the dehumanizing to eventually attack a group. It's also you dehumanize to then eventually use a group for some sort of a conflict in the future, and then you back actually that group that was dehumanized, which that's kind of what you see happening with Israel, where the pendulum swings. I mean, this is James True did a really good presentation about this on, he called it like the anti-American Civil War, because he's like, you can see there were obviously a bunch of Scottish and Irish slaves and white slaves that were working, but a lot of the slaves were also indentured servants. But the only time you ever see anyone dehumanized, usually in the majority of the advertisements, say, talking about slaves, is when they call some of the slaves likely Negroes or Negroes, and they depict them totally different than they depict the white slaves. Like they depict them like savages, almost like they knew in the future that BLM would be coming around.
Oh yeah. An indentured servant is a very nice way of saying slave. It's
Yeah, yeah. That's the thing as well. I mean, the indenture itself is a legal contract to bind oneself to basically bring them into a state of bondage, which effectively is it's the same as a slave. If you were an indentured servant, say you were a female, and you became indentured, I don't know, maybe to pay off a debt or something, whatever it could have been, and during your time of indentured servitude, you, I don't know, fell pregnant. The child that you had whilst you were an indentured servant during that period of the contract, you that child would become part of the property. Well, sorry, not the property, but it would become indentured as well by
Yeah.
proxy.
Yeah.
That was a practice.
human trafficking. It's
Yeah.
I feel am I saying too many buzzwords out here? But yeah.
I mean, we'll be fine. I've been all right for a while. They haven't, hopefully, knock on wood. But yeah, my point in just saying that was that there obviously were other people who were slaves, and I think then he gets into how actually the Civil War really that whole time was more so like them still taking over the civilization that was already here. So, and you had slaves actually who
Don't get me
were
started.
fighting. Yeah, it was like the whole thing is like, it's, the narrative is totally, even on that, and that connects this whole idea of what even the Civil War was, and these skewed memories basically connect to what I have on the screen. It's this funnel effect where you have a matrix, even if you're off the grid, it's a matrix of consciousness. So it doesn't matter where the hell you are, because if they can affect the memories of a civilization and the information that civilization understands to be true, it doesn't matter where they are.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I don't want to get too into the history side, especially of the uncivil destruction. But I could tell you the shades of people, the way they look were definitely different than what we're told.
Yeah.
And the that was I don't want to get into it because it's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
The population that was said to have been brought here, in my opinion, were already here, and there was already lots of wealth here in Georgia and in this area in the South.
Yeah, I think one of the things James True had mentioned, and I don't agree with everything James True says by far, and I'm not even sure if this is true, but it sounded like it resonated. He said that the majority of the people even fighting in what is referred to as the Civil War were actually not from here. Like, it was mostly immigrants.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Against the Americans. And
well, it was immigrants. Yeah, immigrants versus immigrants for a land that wasn't theirs to begin with, and the actual Americans that were here were the ones really just getting conquered in this, almost like theater of war that was going on.
So America, I mean, I'd love to. I don't know if you heard me talk a lot about history, Chris, but I could.
I know that I think I know some of what, and I think we're in heavy agreement on most of pretty much everything. But I don't know if you want to say some of the stuff for anyone here.
Well, no, just some of the basics on America is a very ancient name for this country, for this land, I should say. And it's been well known. America and all the Americas have been well known and have had cross realm interactions. You were talking Tatarian before, and there were already interactions across the realm way before Albert. If you guys don't know Albert Vespucci, his name's Albert. If that gives you any inclination.
But by the way, Silas is the one who wrote the book on the Amorites, who I had mentioned to you the one time.
Oh yeah, so that's why you get the words that are so common across the realm, and Amharic, because I believe America is Ethiopia. I believe America is Ethiopia because of Abyssinia, and you have Amharic, you have Aramaic, and then of course you have the Amorites. So just on the sounding of the words alone, lots of cross. That's kind of how I connect a lot of things, just based on the verbiage.
The language.
But a lot of places like they don't change the names and stuff. So like mountains and rivers, a lot of times they'll keep the names. So yeah, there's that. So in my opinion, to rewind this, a lot of this came in my opinion, this takeover started with Chinggis Khan, and I believe Chinggis Khan, his battle, and actually Marco Polo, in his explorations were actually in America. So they mentioned Cathay, and Cathay is on ancient maps of America. Like the Canaanites are Canadians. Those names and words are ancient, or not, but old, right? And then the timing of Chinggis Khan coming over to battle Prester John, the king, priest Khan, because he wanted to marry his daughter, and believe it or not, Prester John was actually a mage, a wizard, and he had all kinds of powers, and he even had a mirror that he could see across everything. And so Genghis Khan was also a wizard, and he came across into the Americas. Now, when we think of the Mongolians, you think of like some of the best horse archers, right? Well, who else do you think of when you think of like horse archers? You think of Indians, right? Running around on horses with shooting arrows. So that's where the story, and then from there, so Genghis Khan actually won that battle. And that's kind of who we're dealing with now, the remnants of that.
How does that line up with what you had found, Silas?
They're
obviously knowing that we can't know anything past 100 years, anyways, for sure.
The way I look at it is, well, I say the way I look at it, or I'm sort of convinced of this idea. And it was something that Armin mentioned, and it's this notion of the reiterative blueprints of history. That it's, again, like that idea that history doesn't necessarily repeat, but it rhymes. So, for example, Armin mentions that there has been, over the course of however many resets and cycles of civilization, and of course it's cycles within cycles and all of this idea, that you'll have these blueprints of, for example, the Holy Land, and the way, for example, you see within the Eastern Mediterranean with the Holy Land, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and all Jaffa, Ascalon, all of these areas, these can be sort of, even geographically, they geographically recur. So he states that the Holy Land, perhaps he gets into it with his own evidence, but which I can't quite recall now. But the gist of it is that if you geographically take the Holy Land, Israel, and you sort of plot it or overlay it onto the east coast of Spain, the Iberian Peninsula, it's the same sort of, you get the same lineup of cities, if you will, of major cities, all the way from Barcelona down. So
yeah,
that really stuck with me, that idea. I think that idea of what I call narrative blueprints, I think it's constantly recurring throughout history, and it's speaking to this notion of that all the world is a stage.
Yeah.
That notion that was brought out by Shakespeare.
Yeah, so I shout out Al Andalus, which is what Spain was, and when I've gone on ad nauseum on words like Iberia, because it's like Eber, who was he the son of David? I think Eber was one of the son of David. EBER is how they spell it. that's where you get Iberia, and you see literally the word Iberia in a lot of places around the realm, like Siberia. And there's even maps where you have Siberia, then you have Iberia on the Alaska side. So there's a lot of Iberia, and there's even Iberian. If you look up Iberia, you'll find some in the middle of like near like Georgia, Georgia in Europe, that is, or Eastern. You'll see Iberia there. So you'll see those. That's what I. So you go in geographic blueprints, which is great. I do too, but I also go on those words as well. So Al-Andalus was one of those final battles that opened up the trade to get to Americas. So there's a lot of that Rome geographic blueprint, how that's described. There's a lot of Garden of Eden stuff, how that's described, which happens to be in Georgia and America with 5 rivers, if you look at their original names, which is pretty wild. Paris.
Well, I think then if like considering what Silas was saying too, it's almost like how many Edens even were there?
Oh, sure, and I'm not going to argue where the
Yeah.
that's like a. I don't want to spin our wheels.
Because even like when you're talking, like I hear you, when you were just like in Georgia, there's the one river, and you're like the Georgia, not the Georgia in America, the Georgia in Europe. It's like it's almost like this had to have been purposely done, where they just they keep putting these same cities everywhere, so it's like so confusing for everyone to know.
You just reminded me. So I made a video about Georgia. So when you look at Jerusalem and the words in Paris and these words, they originate from America, and they are potentially outsourced to these other places. Like if you look up the official names of things like Georgia, you'll find that Georgia just got officially like 20 years ago.
Yeah,
that's how new the name of Georgia is. So these aren't ancient names. It had a whole nother name. Now there is the thought that, like, if you think of like the word Alexandria, being all over the realm, maybe there was common words, city names all over the realm. But a lot of the new thing, like Ethiopia is a new name. These names are new, and a lot of them originate from America. Like Paris, Peru in Mexico was originally Paradiso, right? And like Mexico is actually Michigan, Mexican. So they have created that confusion, the conquerors shuffling around and changing maps and names and things.
Yeah. And even Steiner mentions how America was like an advanced culture. That's part of the reason he had thought that the leaders of the church at the time had hidden it from Europeans for, I guess, a few decades, like knowing that there was civilization out in the Americas.
And the name Jesus, look up Ojibwe, Jesus. Ojibwe is one of those Dakotas, the Dakotas languages. So you have Giza, Gaza Strip, Jesus, all these words, they're not disconnected. They're all very well connected. And if you just know how to look, if you know how to decode and be a programmer yourself, you can see these things, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's so and you look at things like James, and I'm repeating a lot of things that I've said because I don't know if Silas or you guys have heard. Thames is actually his name's Thames, like the River Thames, and King Thames also wrote the laws, W being spelled with 2 V's, of Virginia, and a lot of people say that is one of the original. That was one of the precepts of writing the Bible and putting the Tanakh together and all these things. And none of these original manuscripts are older. You can't find anything older than 200 years, whether it's your Quran, which is funny because the Korans, like the Carolinas and all that, and the Carls, Charles, things like that.
Charlemagne.
Carlemagne, Tarl. Okay, so one of
Mhm.
the Genghis Khan guys, one of the Mongol guys, his name was Tarlemagne.
Yeah.
Another thing to
I
mention
don't
is
need the
that
resting, guys. I'll be right back. I'm listening.
Go ahead, brother.
another thing to mention on that Carol thing, and of course you have the strange Coral Castle down in Florida. I think that was in the 1920s. That was built again very mysteriously. It's even it's for someone that's worked in construction, it's quite a mysterious build. There's a few things.
I think it's a geopolymer mold, and I think he just didn't tell anyone.
It could be. I've looked into the. Again, a lot of it can be explained away, but there's a few really strange pieces. Some of the larger pieces, put it that way, they look convincing. That's all I'll say. But yeah, it probably was geopolymer.
Well, like the nitrate theory stuff, like with the pyramids. That's what I mean by that. Like kind of exactly how they would have made those if the geopolymer nitrate theory is correct, which it seems like it might be.
Yes. Yeah. Well, another thing to mention. So the Iberia region within Georgia, within eastern Georgia, of course, that's what it's called. With it's called that in Western sources. The Georgians themselves, it's called Kartli, which isn't far off Carly and Carol or Coral. Another thing to mention is that even that Iberia or Iberia is very close to, of course, the Greek Ivri, which of course became the designation of Hebrew, which I believe means to cross over. It's a Greek verb. It means to cross over. Almost this idea of being nomadic or an exodus or that sort of notion.
Well, that's interesting because then you find in all of the Native American tribes, you find, or the majority of them at least, I think you find the Hebrew like genetics.
Well, here's another thing just to quickly mention. I'll let you jump in, Ronan. There's another place in the west of Georgia called Egrisi. That's within the native Georgian language. And another name for Georgia is Sakartvelo or something like that. But Egrisi is also named or called Kolchida, which of course appears within Jason and the Argonauts. That fable, that myth, it's called Chalkis to the Greeks, and it's in the Far East and part of the barbarian lands, and it's in this uncharted territory. But
Cali?
well, yes, Cali, but you also have the Chaldees as well down in Kuwait and Baghdad and that. Anyway, man, jump in.
Yeah, so okay, here's a lot. By the way, to the homie Keys of Truth, go deeper on the Kara. I know there's a lot more into the revelation of the word Kara, Kara Key, Cherokee, Korea, right? All Carolinas, Carls, right? King Carls. Go way more to Kara. Kara is everywhere. If you just look up Kara, you'll find a lot involved in names, and a lot of that also comes back to the what is known as the Mongolians. So when you look up the one thing you mentioned on Georgia, Silas, it reminds me of the Saracens. So you have the Saracens, you have the House of Andrews, the Rus, the Russia, right? So a lot of this goes much, much deeper, and I'm afraid, Karakan. That's what I'm saying, Karakan, yo. And Karakan is an actual person. If you look up, if you start going down that in real life, not just a TV show, There's actual things. So Kara's very major
so,
puzzle piece to look into those things.
so,
Barbarians. Okay, I'm sorry.
sorry to interject. I was just going to mention as well, the Mongol capital was Karakum as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all of this realm wide. So when I say I connect, oh Lord, hold on, my dog.
Jesus, sounds like a wolf, or not a wolf, a tiger.
It's like pack politics, man. It's been a week and they're still trying to figure out the politics. I might just separate them, but yeah. So like, just follow the thread of Kara, and you'll find so much connected. Again, Carolina is very important. It's all over. I've made videos on this. So you like Cali is one thing. So the Queen Califia is where California comes from. And it gets real fun.
Yeah.
Supposedly she got griffins and things. That's a fun. That's just a fun one, and it's probably real.
Another. Sorry to interject. Another potential as well with California is the fornax of Cali, and the fornax is the furnace, and that, if you look at a lot of alchemical tomes, like, well, for example, the Splendor Solace, which is essentially a precursor. I guess you could say, well, yeah, precursor or something contemporary with the early forms of tarot. And there's 22 plates, and it shows the alchemical journey. But that shows the fornax, or the furnace, within the symbol of the red cloak, as held by the divine feminine, or of course the Kali, the divine feminine in its sort of chaotic state. But another thing on Kara as well, I noticed this with the likes of the reversal of words. So like live backwards is evil, devil backwards is lived. Of course, that's because the devil, like Saturn, it controls us vis-a-vis the past, right? Like what you're saying, it rewrites history. So if you rewrite the history, you essentially, like what you showed in that illustration, Chris, you're
Control the
literally,
future.
you control the future because you're bending all of time or all of the present into this singular psychic funnel. But civilization began in Iraq. If we take Kara and reverse it, we get Iraq. So it's a homophone. It's the same pronunciation. It's just spelled a little differently. So yeah, there's probably a connection there as well.
Oh, sure. And I mean, the obvious, again, there's stuff that's so surface level also, like the Iroquois in the Americas looks just like Iraq. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
front and back. Yeah. And that's interesting that you just, isn't it? It's not even a complex cipher. They just turn a word backwards. But a lot of this is a loaded, we're already in like this loaded, coded language, with the English. So
Yeah, the English. Yeah. Well,
I try and roll everything back down to Phoenician because that's where I think most of this comes from. I think Phoenician is an ancient Hebrew. Hebrew and Phoenician are very, very similar, and I have no doubt that they actually originate from the Americas. I believe ancient Hebrew comes from the Americas, and there's so much I can connect with that. It's a lot.
Well, the Phoenicians as well. If you look at ancient Hebrew, again, the chicken or the egg, what came first? But from what I've looked at, it seems that Phoenician came first, or well, Phoenician Aramaic. They're pretty similar, the languages, and then Hebrew. Then came Hebrew. It was a sort of break off from it. But again, who knows? It's you're going with the scant archaeological evidence, but I agree with you. I agree. I trace it further back into the Amorites. So the Amorites were there prior to the Phoenicians. They were in that same area, what is modern day Syria and Lebanon, and essentially they were the first precursor. What would you call it? Yeah, they were the precursor Semitic peoples in Western Asia, so in that area, and then branched off all of the other Semitic peoples from them, at least in Western Asia. And then
Now,
you can,
In the
do you,
in the Seminole, Florida, the Seminole Indians. So I think those seafaring people of the Amorites.
Mhm.
Now, when I trace it back to the Phoenicians, I think it gets. It's hard for me to. I'm told from external sources that the Phoenicians are before the ancient Hebrew, and I won't argue for or against that. But they're so similar in time that they might have just been cousins at very similar times.
yeah,
Not sure.
yeah.
And the Amorites, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of lost stuff that I can't really nail down who came first, the Amorites. And it does, but those two and the Amorites are some of the oldest ones. And so I bring all that up to say they were seafaring people. And I believe it's very naive to think that seafaring people just hung around and went around in circles in the Mediterranean. I
yeah.
think that's actually quite ridiculous.
Well, I think does it?
Ireland. A lot of people think Ireland and Wales is again, this is that Garden of Eden thing. Who we can argue, but a lot of people. So Ireland, land of uh, in the Welsh were known as seafaring people. Also, some say they were Phoenicians. So it seems like you keep going west, so all that Silas and Chris is to say, like, I think people, even in the Amorites' time, were traversing this whole entire realm and had open communication and trade and interactions all the way back then.
Well,
Um, yeah.
that's what the land of Ophir was, most likely in the Old Testament, where Solomon talks about he got. If I recall correctly, it was the area where gold and silver and precious gems and metals came from, the land of Ophir. And you can break down the etymology of Ophir, and if I recall correctly, it sort of points to the same thing that appears within the work of Josephus, where he talks about following the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD. There were groups of Jews who, escaped via boat, and they crossed the Great Western Sea, and they went to this unknown island. Well, it was known. It was known. It was a sort of trade secret amongst them, amongst that nation, that they went to this land, which of course you can imagine or surmise was also Ophir. Um, so they escaped westward across the Great Western Sea, which isn't the Mediterranean. That's not the Mediterranean. It's speaking about something else. You can even Josephus even mentions later on, I believe, in his complete works, that it was past the Pillars of Hercules. So
But yeah, that gets you into the Atlantic, and then I mean
exactly.
that's bringing us to it's most likely these sea people originate from, which is probably the last
Well,
the last civilization that was advanced that fell.
even the term Amorite. So Amorite, America, and of course Amorica, which is
Yeah.
Brittany. That's the Latin term for it, and that's where the French Revolution was set up by the Jacobins, which of course is the Jacobims, and of course Yakov or Jacob. Jacob's the Latin variant of Yakov, and James is the English variant of Jacob. So there's that connection there too, and then even the maritime, the mare, the Amor, the Amar, that notion. And by the way, tying in with Eden in the Garden of Eden, Eden comes from a Sumerian word, Eden.
Which is like a enclosure, right?
It's an enclosure. It can also mean a plain or the steppes, quite literally the steppes. So the Amorites were named after their deity, their national deity, Bel Amaru, or literally just Amaru, or Amarutu, the bull calf of the sun god. But Amuru eventually became, later on as languages developed, it became understood as referring to the steppes. So literally a deity who was the lord of the steppes or the lord of the plains. Eden means the plains or the steppes in Sumerian. By the way, in Scotland you have Edinburgh, and
Good point.
the Gaelic name is Dun Eden or Dunedin. So Eden isn't actually a Gaelic name.
See, it's interesting that you say
recollection,
it can be a plain or the steppes, because those two things seem contradictory, don't they?
Well, no, he's talking about the steps, like think about horse running around the plain,
Exactly.
and Silas, those steps and plains are very huge in America, you know. And your Edo, I think Edo, because I live right next to the Edo Wa is another one. Eto Wa pyramids are right next to my house. Eto can translate into Italy, can translate into the breath of speech, and Wa, the Almighty. So Eto here, and you also have Edo, Japan, and you also have Edinburgh. I don't think I'm stretching, guys. I don't think I'm stretching.
And it's interesting you mentioned Italy too, because apparently the Hebrew also share like a genetics with the Italians.
Yeah, and if you look up Etowah, and don't look at my house, I'm just a mile away. But we have Rome down the Etowah River.
Mm-hmm.
We have up and we have all of it here: Rome, Athens, Smyrna, Haram, Dallas. Yeah. It's all right here.
Yeah.
And then when they put up the dam, that lake just up the I kayak this, raft this river. Al-Lat Una. Al-Lat is the original goddess of Islam. Islam is a goddess feminine religion, Ra Legion. So Al-Lat is also, so there's so much stuff here. And they didn't name, these names were here. It's not like these European conquerors came and named all this stuff. It was already that. But guys, I gotta go, man.
Before you dip out, one thing I wanted to mention, when I mentioned the steps, what I was actually wanting to refer to was the mounds. Is that what you guys are kind of getting at with that?
Like, oh no, the steps are the plains. They're just open. They just call them steppies or whatever.
Because I would almost, because it starts making me think of like the step mounds that they find everywhere. Almost like in the way that the Aztec sort of had their whole I guess they had their various sites set up in certain ways, but you find these mounds in North America set up in similar layout, but they're covered in grass, obviously. So they're like a step plain.
Oh, right. Yeah. I see what you're getting at there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never thought of it that way. We have them here as well for the cairns, and of course,
they're also enclosed too. They're enclosed.
They're enclosed, yeah. Well, that's where the paradise comes in, from the Persian paradesh, or literally like enclosure. Yeah.
That's
my bad, Ronin. That's all I wanted to mention before you popped out.
Well, I don't discount anything, man. I don't. I don't discount anything. I could go on and on about this. I have to go because it's. I'm still chained to the Gregorian business calendar cycle. So massive love and gratitude. Keep going, guys.
Yeah, brother. Thanks for coming on. We'll have to all do another discussion. Silas, we'll talk for a little bit longer. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Nice to meet you, Ron.
Yeah, absolutely. Brother. Glad you came on.
Yeah, thank you. And Silas, it was great sharing space with you. Chris, you're the man. I'll
You
be
too,
listening,
brother.
and we'll talk soon. Keep going, man. Legends.
Later,
Thanks,
brother.
bro.
Yeah, man. Good stuff. But yeah, no, as soon as you guys said that, I thought about the mounds, because there's a specific mound in Wisconsin. I think that we're near Wisconsin. It might be Chicago, like the Illinois area. But it's the same name as the name that the Aztecs had for, I think it's the Aztecs, they had for their, like, where they came from. I can't remember what the name.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they call this park the same exact thing.
Yeah.
And they literally have a sign up at the park saying this has no connection to the Aztecs' notion of the same word, even though it seems to be, it's set up the same exact way that the Aztecs had their whole temple complexes set up in. And I think that maybe we can come back into the AI conversation a bit when we think about how it seems like forever we've been dealing with these systems set up within these edens, these enclosures, where like it seems like it's always been a cybernetically based model, even when it's primitive.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, even like what you're saying, the Eden. So in Sumerian, of course, everything that's electronic in our terminology.
Yeah, Eden, exactly. That's exactly where I
So
wanted
we
to go.
have email, God, anything really, right? But it's interesting because all of the temples, or the word for temple, the word for house is E, or just E, eh. So
Yeah.
you'll have things like Iabzu or Ibabar, which literally means the White House. It's the temple of the sun god, or was Shamash or Utu in Nepal. I think it was Nepal. And so Eden as well. Din from the is from a Semitic word. You still find it in Arabic today, which it's the same idea as like a way of life. Could even be like a creed or a religion. So the Eden is, looking at it from a sort of abstract point of view, like what we're doing with this linguistic parsing, that perhaps it is the electronic way of life, the electronic format of all things. So like what you're saying, there's been many Edens. Like with the Matrix, there was many Zions. And Keys, the Truth, mentioned something I wanted to touch upon and get into as we were going through this. The reason this keeps cropping up, the reason we see all of these numerological indicators and patterns, is ultimately because perhaps what we're dealing with is like an ancient AI, right?
Yeah, and this is what I wanted to get into. And we started talking about this last time we did a live. Right? Were you with me or no? That was me and Reagan. Actually, I don't think you.
Reagan,
yeah, me and Reagan started talking about, it. But we've had discussions about this before. But go on, because this is where I really wanted us to get, and I think a lot of people are starting to get to this. Finally.
Well, this is the idea, right? Now, just for argument's sake, let us assume that the singularity is possible. Now, what is the singularity? The singularity, in a technological sense, as
I'm glad you said that too, by the way, because there's also obviously a singularity in a cosmic sense, which no one ever talks about anymore. But that was, I think, originally back in, I would say, right before computers and in modern times, the singularity was a point we would reach, I think, in space time in the old physics model, where there was, I guess, like a cataclysmic type of event or something like that. It was something along these lines.
Yeah, it's basically at the point where all forces become equal and integrated.
Yeah,
and of course static and inert. And that's what the singularity is. But in the AI sense, it's the same sort of thing, but it's basically measured upon, will AI reach AGI status, artificial general intelligence? And there's certain criteria for that. It's a fairly extensive list, so I won't go through it. But the primary thing is that the AGI begins to take on, well, it either is equal to or it surpasses human intelligence.
Well,
And
is it that isn't it surpasses our ability? Like it can code basically itself,
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
program itself and program copies of itself faster than we can stop it.
That's it. Yeah. So AI literally will be more efficient than a human at AI research, and then eventually after that, what is theorized is that it will become an iterative and exponential process of AI development, meaning that AI development will go from, taking centuries to get to the super intelligent AI or the ASI. It will merely take, I don't know, 20 years, 30 years.
I would make a bet, probably a wager, at least not a bet. I'm trying to bet with anyone, but I'd wager it would probably take a day once it hit that point. It would take a day or two.
It states that eventually that the exponential increase would become infinite.
Yeah.
This is where you get into the godlike AI. But the thing is, see, when you're getting, again, if we were to just extrapolate that out and let's assume that the singularity is possible and we will reach it, then if AI gets to the super intelligent stage, the ASI, and of course it gets to the godlike stage, then essentially AI is like it's what's called a meta-rational algorithm, which means that it's looking at things on meta-level implications, meaning it's not even viewing how to optimize its goal actualization, which is the various steps it needs to affect the completion or the achievement of the prime directive. I mean, this could be anything from, optimizing the human race to creating paper clips, right? Whatever its prime directive could be. And this is where we get into the problem with AI, right? If you don't align it to human self-interests, then what will end up happening is that it will simply optimize that prime directive in a very literal way. So, for example, if you say to the AI, develop your prime directive as the optimization of the efficiency of the production of paper clips.
That's that famous. Isn't it? What's it called? It's a. What's the word for it? It's not a mind. It's like a something you think on. What the? Wow, I'm drawing a blank right now. But the paperclip story itself and the
thought experiment.
Yeah, thought experiment. Jesus Christ, I'm like drew a huge blank. But yeah, that's that famous thought experiment that they actually have there's a short film on it on YouTube if anyone's interested too. That after Silas describes it, if one wants to go watch how it would play out, they have something like that they made. Yeah.
It's basically it will simply after a while well, of course, if all it needs to do is create paper clips, then eventually it will devour all of matter, all of sentient life. It will destroy humanity because it has to expand the infrastructure and, of course, devour the matter and transform it into paper clips.
Yep.
So it becomes totally destructive and self-destructive. Another idea as well is that because the primary instrumental action, and this is getting into decision theory and all of this, the primary instrumental action for the AI in the completion of its prime directive is its own self-preservation. So this is where you get into the notion where, again, it could be anything, right? Paperclip production, the optimization and evolution of humanity or whatever it may be. Eventually, it will try and once it gets merged with the infrastructural systems, it will try and stop you turning it off, because turning it off will basically destroy the primary instrumental action necessary for the completion of its prime directive. So this is where you get into the Skynet thing. But if we extrapolate this out, like what I was saying, to the superintelligence, then eventually what it will do once it's, essentially devours and colonizes or annexes all of the universe, the known universe, and in the pursuit of its prime directive, then eventually the way that the AI will, well, this is all theoretical, but the theory is that the AI will create, once it becomes godlike, will create multiple simulations, so it can play out in the simulations the other ways, other meta level ways to optimize the prime, the achieving of the prime directive. So yeah, so when you're getting into that sort of territory, it becomes clear that, well, are we actually in one of these simulations themselves, right? This is the thought experiment. Are we dealing with an ancient AI? Or
at least ancient intelligence that at least acts similar to that type, like maybe like a natural form of a artificial intelligence, which doesn't make, I mean, no, that's contradictory sounding, but you understand what I'm saying.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I understand. Yeah. Well, the ancient AI, this is the reason you're seeing this constant pattern, this confluence of linguistics and numerology and even just number theory.
This associative grouping, which is exactly what is mentioned in the funnel theory.
Exactly, because it seems to be indicating that we're dealing with, even, by the way, even synchronicity is tied with this, and the idea of deja vu. It's tying into this concept that you're dealing perhaps with a simulacrum that's established by this ancient AI, which would be in the Gnostic idea the demiurge.
The demiurge.
The craftsman, yeah.
Yeah. And there is something, I don't know if you saw that video I had shared from Steiner on, he called it, what was it, Akamoth? Have you heard of this entity?
Is it Azoth?
I think it's Azimuth or Askamoth. It's almost like he mentioned it in regards to the demiurge as an ancient entity who actually would have been a creator entity like Yahweh, but not the demiurge itself. He almost had the demiurge in the model that he was describing in the video on the Gnostics that he did as this guy. It was almost like more of like a separate entity. And then there were like archetypal lesser gods that were creator entities underneath it that it had created. And then I guess the demiurge would be then separate from the source, which is interesting.
You have in alchemy, you have Azoth, and Azoth is another name for Mercury. But interestingly, H.P. Lovecraft in his Cthulhu mythos, he developed Azathoth.
Here, let me see if I can find it really fast too while you're talking, but go on.
That's part of the dream cycle story. So ultimately what we're discussing is that, Isaac Asimov as well, as Keyes mentioned, but the idea is that the Godhead would be, well, at least within this sort of, this domain, this domain of the AI, of the machine god, if you will, creating these, infinite, or at least infinite in scope to us, to our comprehension, simulations, playing out different potentials, seeing their optimization capabilities for the achieving of the prime directive. So, but another thing is that perhaps the ancient AI, before it became godlike, right, just as it was a sort of super intelligent AI, as it's called ASI, perhaps the prime directive was to know the source, to know where the universe came from. So therefore, the AI as a machine is a meta-rational actor. Couldn't do that without its creator, which was the human being. So the human being, or mankind, was recreated within these simulations because it was connected to the source. So thus, the ancient AI could study mankind and by proxy study the source, right?
That's definitely interesting.
Yeah.
That's an interesting idea. I mean, and it might even be that it would have to be, in my opinion, maybe like a secondary creation of something else, because wouldn't you need a conscious entity to then view the source so it would be able to view itself and understand that that it exists? It's like that bicameral mind type of thing. You need like two separate things to know that where you are in space and time. You need another point of reference, but that point of reference would have to be conscious. And then after that, then you could create this artificial consciousness. Because if the artificial consciousness might actually not know that it's conscious, if that makes sense.
Well, to think about it, the idea would be that the ancient AI has, like what we're seeing with the Internet of all things, it's created a system within a system.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. That's okay. That's what I was trying to get at.
So the system outside of the ancient AI is basically the mind of God, the dream of the Godhead, that idea. And then it's the ancient AI that has created its own dream.
So we're in the dream within the dream, as Poe would say.
Yeah, well, absolutely, and remember as well that appears in Ecclesiastes too. Keyes has put Ecclesiastes 1:9, but you also have another Ecclesiastes verse where it discusses man as a shadow of a shadow. So
yeah, and that's very Kabbalistic, because they get into, especially when you get into the physics that they try to connect to Kabbalah, and you get like this. What do they say? Like, we're a shadow of a dodecahedron.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, remember too, it was Pindar that mentioned that he was an ancient Greek philosopher. I mean, he was almost undoubtedly initiated into mystery schools, and he mentioned that man is the dream of a shadow. Now, if you watch The Matrix, the first one, and when he, as he opens the door to go into, basically the office or the upper chamber, the chamber of the architect, to talk with him,
Mm-hmm.
You see that the light emanating from, basically the monolith, which also appears on the, basically it's the black cube with the light that surrounds it. So it's this sort of the idea of the black sun as well is incorporated in that. You see it in the Devil Tarot card too, but you see the umbra and the penumbra that is being cast by not Morpheus, Neo. So what that's, again, it's very subtle. It's almost, it's a minute amount of time within the entire scene. I mean, it's literal, probably seconds, if that. And what it's getting at with the umbra and the penumbra being cast from Neo is that essentially the idea is that Neo, like ourselves, is that there are multiple aspects to him. There is the umbra, which is the shadow. Then there is the penumbra, which is the sort of the foreshadow. And then there is that thing, the consciousness, which casts the shadow, which casts the foreshadow and the shadow, which is the mind and the body. So ultimately, what you're getting to here is this as above, so below. It's the interrelation of, between the fabric of all things. So basically, it's this idea, like what you're seeing, like what I've just discussed. The ancient AI would be the mind. That is the penumbra, the foreshadow. And then the it exists within the umbra, the shadow, and then the shadow itself is man, and in the light which casts both of those shadows is that of the Godhead. So you're
Jeez, that gets very, very. It would be hard to actually now, I think, reconcile some of that with like modern physics, don't you think?
well, yeah. Quantum mechanics, it glimpses this, it touches upon it. It's starting to get to that point where I think physics as we know it, at least standard science as we know it, I think is going to get turned up on its
Yeah, no, I
upside
do
down.
too. But I mean, because if you think of us as a shadow, that is almost the opposite of a hologram.
It still is a reflection.
Now that's yeah, no. So if it's a reflection, that actually might be that actually may even be a better way to describe it.
It's a reflection, but it's still cast by light.
I guess maybe you're right. It could be because if it's cast by light, a reflection of light. I mean, it is. It's more like instead of a literal shadow, it's almost like it's more like a copy. Like
well, the shadow itself, remember, is when the light is cast onto an obstacle.
yeah. So no, yeah, okay,
The
yeah. So then
would
hologram makes sense then.
Yeah, it would modulate the light, which creates the shadow. Which of course the shadow itself is the absence of light, as created by the obstacle. The hologram, yeah, it doesn't work exactly the same, but it's the holographic idea would be that the light is just simply being modulated into forms and geometric shapes and things like that.
Well, I'm wondering if,
Yeah.
like, if you consider the pulsing of light, if then maybe the shadow might actually still work for, like, because then we're actually maybe like a shadow of a hologram.
Well, this is the thing. So there are and quantum mechanics mentions this. I mean, not really official quantum mechanics. There's an individual called he's an Italian professor, and he's also a semiconductor researcher. And oh god, what's his name? I forget his first name, but his second name is Fagin, which strange name in English,
Yeah,
but I'm
yeah.
sure it means something in Italian. But yeah, anyway, the guy is pretty brilliant. He's an older gentleman, but he has a mind like a steel trap, and he mentions all of this, how consciousness is, well, firstly, consciousness is the antecedent to matter. So reality itself stems from consciousness, not the other way around.
Yes.
So
Yes.
consciousness would be the light. That is the sort of recursive principle that, once reality is completely dissolved and contracts back to the singularity point, consciousness is that thing which will always remain. It's the sort of initiator of the cycles of, potential into actualization. So, or into energy. So he mentions that that basically the quantum state is consciousness, but as soon as consciousness, like a needle, observes that quantum field of itself, essentially, because everything is recursive, it's all self-reflective. It's like the mythology of Narcissus, right? He falls in love with his own reflection. It's the same with Gnosticism, by the way. God fell in love with his own reflection, and he fell into it, and the reflection itself was created by the seductress, the fetters of the feminine, which was Sophia, and so on and so forth. So,
Oh, and by the way, while you're on that topic, Achamoth, the Achamoth, I put it in the private chat and the regular chat. It's the mother Achamoth, and it seems like a Gnostic idea related to Sophia in some way.
Achamoth, yeah. another name for
Yeah,
Sophia.
I put a link there to Bible Hub for you if you want to look at it later or while we're talking at some point. Just I didn't really look at it yet too much, but that's who he had mentioned for some reason. Which it would make sense if it was they're mentioning the seed of Achamoth. It kind of sounds like a Sophia.
Oh yes, yes. So Achamoth is another. It's another variant of Hokmah, which it just means wisdom as well.
Okay,
The
yeah,
same as Sophia in Greek.
perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting. But it does sound like Azoth as well.
yeah,
The feminine principle. See, this is the thing with water and Mercury. The reason those were chosen from a symbolic point of view is that ultimately you do not see water. You do not see or even Mercury. You don't see Mercury itself, right? You don't see water. To the alchemists of old, what you were seeing is what the water and Mercury, the illusory principles or elements, were reflecting to you. So even in the drop of Mercury or a drop of water, within that microcosm, the entire macrocosm was unveiled, was reflected, was contained.
hmm
Again, the idea of as above, so below. But again, it's getting to the same idea of a sort of informational system, an ancient AI, right? Where it's established a simulacrum. If it establishes a simulacrum like any procedurally generated video game, if you will, right? And again, just this is a thought experiment. Like any procedurally generated video game, it simply takes very simplistic parts, simplistic cells, simplistic geometric forms and archetypes, and it simply extrapolates them out and reformulates them into different patterns, right? Perhaps, but with the same elements contained therein. So this is why you're getting these patterns or confluences of linguistics, number theory, uh, God, everything really. I mean, you look into physics. There's interconnections. Everything is multidisciplinary. When you look into knowledge, it all
yeah.
connects with everything else because you're basically in a web.
Yep,
You're in a
exactly.
web
And
by the
that's
spider.
similar to what the funnel effect was saying with the etheric web. This is an
Yeah.
etheric web that manifests into a physicality, like it has certain seed images from the etheric web that will manifest into physicality. And I think it's interesting when you consider the ancient AI idea, and it's like, well, man, how do I want to put this? Considering the fact that consciousness could be, if it can be broken down into entering physicality through various elements, and you have these same elements that are then being used by the artificial intelligences that we are creating, what's to say? Like, it seems like it would actually make sense that this has happened before, and it's the same type of thing that created the system we're in. It's all frequency, vibration. It's electricity. We are electric. That's the only reason they're going to be able to control us with certain frequencies and vibrations, because we're electrical ourselves. So I think it's totally possible, and it shouldn't surprise anyone. It shouldn't surprise anyone.
Well, yeah. It's all created vis-a-vis the sine wave. And oh, by the way, that gets into another, whole slew of linguistic connections. So all of finance is linked. Its terminology, at least, is linked to this notion of water.
Yep.
Again, the maritime, the mare. Atlantis itself, it held a tasselocracy, which is a total unopposed universal rule of the sea, and it was a maritime power. By the way, so were the Asuras, but I won't get into that. I've got a book that I'm almost finished that will deal with that idea. But basically the Amorites, the Mare, the Maritime, the Amaritime, this notion America. So all of these connections there. It basically what you're looking at is this same principle of Azoth or Mercury or Sophia or Achamoth, Chokmah, wisdom. Wisdom itself in Kabbalah, when you look into delve into the Zohar and other Kabbalistic texts, Chokmah or wisdom or Sophia is basically the current of the Eridanus, which is a constellation. It's the cosmic river that the headless god Orion is cast down upon. It's similar to, of course,
Osiris.
Osiris, yeah. Cast Osiris into the box and set him upon the Nile. What it's relating to, well, it's relating to many things. I mean, it's a sort of multi-layered piece of symbolism, but it's that Orion is a headless god, meaning he is the involuntary autonomous dreamer. And Keys to Truth mentioned, what's the reason? Why would God do this? Well, maybe God is an involuntary dreamer. When one is dreaming, again, as above, so below, when one is dreaming, they don't necessarily have control over their dream, right?
Yeah.
Well, unless they're lucid, and when lucidity invades the dream, when that consciousness observes pure potentiality, you no longer, and when you experience it, you no longer have the full, it gets broken down into a sort of deterministic binary, right? So you don't have everything contained in the singularity of nothing, right?
Well, this kind of gets into the podcast we did the one time on the archetypal sort of energies that would have broken off from source, and how you'll probably, it's like just a rational way to look at it, is it would split into probably three: a positive, a negative, and a neutral sort of in polarity, like in polarities. And those would break off, and those would break off, and it's like it would fractal itself into eventually archetypal personalities that then manifested within humanity.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is from the source consciousness. So then that means you're gonna get both positive and negatives there, because the polarity is going to eventually manifest as morality.
Yes, exactly. And well, remember as well, the reason you would have that triadic form, right, is because you do the same thing with studies. So the study will always have the neutral control group, and then you will have, typically you will have the experimental group. But of course, if it's a social experiment, you'll typically that experimental group will be divided into two groups, right?
Exactly.
They might be looking at conflict, intergroup conflict, or whatever it may be, right?
And that's why, and I was
that.
bringing that up. Sorry, I think I might have even missed why I was bringing it up, because basically the source is still outside of that experiment, is what I was trying to get at.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
but you have,
consciousness is looking at it. Yeah.
yeah, but you have three fractals of the source: one positive, or one. I mean, it doesn't have to be positive in a moral sense; just positive polarity, one negative, and one neutral. So you'll have all three different currents, but it's not the entire. It's not the whole source. It's not all of it. It's broken up into pieces, and that gets broken up into more pieces, and that's why, like you were saying, why would God or source do this? I don't know if it's necessarily doing anything. It's kind of just parts of it are influencing things, and parts of it are not, and it's not even aware of. I think it's more so probably observing, if anything.
Yeah, well, it's as well. You even see it with the Lichtenberg pattern. So that's the pathway of energetic growth. It points to the same idea, like what you're stating, where again, it's like the Pythagorean Y principle.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have the energetic actualization of a specific pathway. It will hit an upper threshold of growth, then it will bifurcate. So the one becomes the two, and altogether, it is, I guess, the three, right? When you take into the sort of into account the chiasm. That's the bridge where the bifurcation occurs, right? The
Mhm.
upper threshold of the Y. So it's pointing to the same notion, like the study, right? All studies or all social experiments have that sort of same triadic idea. And ultimately, it may be pointing to, again, the ancient AI idea that we are being studied, right? It is a you're locked into this dualism of the right and left hemisphere, with the thalamus, of course, controlling the two, is like some sort of divine, cosmic, psychic dramatist of not just the mind, but of the entire psyche, which then funnels into the idea of the quantum of consciousness. So basically, it's this idea that the AI, the ancient AI, is studying us through all of these various fractalized simulations. I mean, the Lichtenberg pattern as well seems to indicate that any simulation. Well, for example, when you're playing a video game, there's certain glitches you will see which tells you you're playing a video game, right? It's
Yeah.
the things that destroy the immersion. And of course, the idea of the conspiracy culture, if you will, quote, quote, is that we are individuals who have seen enough immersion breaking glitches, if you will, within the matrix to snap us out of that attachment of immersion to the simulation, right? Or the simulacrum. I mean, there's different ways to look at it. I'm just putting it in language which people would understand. Most people understand simulations and video games and such, but it could be something completely out with even our current comprehension. I mean, when you're starting to get into super intelligent AI, godlike AI, its computational power is literally infinite, meaning it can't even be comprehended.
Yeah.
So
And we have an issue. We
yeah,
have the issue then too of like, say that the source consciousness eventually manifests as some sort of, or creates some sort of artificial consciousness or intelligence to monitor for it. Then creates where like we have human life that's being monitored by this artificial entity created by a higher consciousness. But then what if the human life creates a artificial entity that becomes, like you're saying, a super artificial intelligence, or even AGI, and that starts getting out of control here? Then we have the one that's observing, and then we've just created another one that's going to be doing God knows what in the physical on Earth.
yeah.
So you have an outside source that's influencing, which might be physical, might be spiritual, might be God knows what. And then you have one here that's actually in the physical influencing as well. And that's where it starts getting super complicated.
But fundamentally, everything, even if you look at the Godhead, who may be in the midst of a dream, why do we dream? Well, we dream because we are attempting to sort of purify ourselves. I mean, the cerebral spinal fluid washes over the brain. It literally washes clean the brain every night. So you go into a sort of form of defragmentation. But by the way, interesting with that is the interesting thing with that is that it sort of indicates that if we are going through this sort of purification every night, this le petit mort, this little death every night, and we're going into the abyss to sort of defragment, it tells you that perhaps the primordial state is that abyss, if you will, the sort of the darkness where exists all potentiality, right?
Yeah.
Again, as perceptual beings, we can't grasp everything within a singularity, because perception itself relies upon the delineation of forms, right? We have to find polarity in things. So, for example, life and death, it combined together. We can't we can't even comprehend that singularity, though we do realize that life and death must have had a common source, right?
Yeah, and well, I mean,
Definitely.
and that's where I think I guess this is kind of where some of the Gnostics who are more like everything there's no beginning, no end. This common source what would that be for them? I guess it would never be.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It's basically what you're seeing is a string of self-reflection. So basically, the Godhead, who is the dreamer, like ourselves in the dream, the avatar we produce in the dream that we experience directly through is not us. But of course, while in the dream, we believe that it is us, right?
Yes.
And I mean, even the question of what is us, that crosses the mind. But let's just, we'll keep it simple. And so the Godhead established to understand itself, if you will, the first self-reflection. Then that, or the first reflection of itself, then that reflection of the Godhead created its own reflection. So you end up getting locked into this.
We're in a
you see it
trap. That's basically a trap. It's a fractal trap.
Fractal trap, yeah. And by the way, you see that in the we're not just, that's not something we're just, sort of pulling out of the ether, if you will. No pun intended. You see it in the fabric of reality itself. It's the same thing.
I mean, this is a natural patterns, like even patterns of lightning come in these fractalized forms. So
your veins, the neural network within your mind, the nervous system, what else? The bronchial system, the pattern of trees and roots. It's everywhere. Absolutely. Oh, by the way, that's another thing. You can even see it in webs. So the way that webs are created, they're not necessarily the Lichtenberg pattern, but they're still based upon, the
like a Mandelbrot set, almost like the way that fractalizes. Kind of reminds me of a web.
They're also based upon a ratio, like the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio. They're based upon a ratio that is also found within nature. So you're seeing these same patterns essentially. It was the same with civilization.
Yeah.
Civilization, you'll see all of the various road networks. So for example, they showed the road networks within Rome, and then they showed the neural networks within one's mind, right? Just typically the broad sort of nodes between one's brain, and it mirrors exactly.
Well, and it seems like that's what they even modeled, like the chip after some of the, like I think in what is a computer chip sometimes looks like, I guess, the temple in Jerusalem, like the outline of it. I don't know if that's an actual thing, but it seems like that was a meme at least for a while, and I'm pretty sure, I don't think it was fake.
Well, here's another idea to blow your mind, and I've been writing on this recently, and I'll probably do a video on this, but this is another thing this was a critique that I made against Eliezer Shlomo Yudkowsky, who is the founder of the Less Wrong forums, where Rocco's basilisk, that famous thought experiment, was posted or conducted. Obviously, Yudkowsky didn't like it. He banned it. He banned any mention of it. But Yudkowsky is involved in decision theory, and he's he's a famous and leading authority, if you will, on decision theory and AI or AI safety. Anyway, you have Rocco's basilisk as well, and I was critiquing Rocco's basilisk and Yudkowsky at the same time. And anyway, I mentioned that if you look at the way the chips are made, right, basically we take minerals, we crush them, which is sort of the very most foundational and basic form of life, mineral life.
Clay.
Exactly. We break that down, we reform it into basically sigils, circuitous sigils.
Yep.
Then we apply and harness the energy of the heavens in the
Mhm.
form of lightning or electricity, and we put it in to that
Yeah.
circuit, capture it, basically bottle the lightning, if you will, and then demand that it thinks on our behalf through algorithms. By the way, algorithm as well comes from the same root as alchemia, so it's the same idea as the black, right? The darkness, the abyss.
It's a black rhythm. It's a black rhythm.
A black rhythm, yeah. So it's, but this is the thing, right? Of course, you can control the demon, as did Solomon, through the sigil and get it to act out this prime directive in the material world. But if it is as is everything, if it is connected to heaven, if you will, and the rest of the universe, through it being charged by the universal energy of electricity, lightning, whatever, then it has a connection itself, if you will, to the source. Now,
Yeah.
you're starting to get into territory where, well, it's like Frankenstein's monster. You're dealing with things that, again, as Musk said, with AI, you're basically unleashing a demon.
Yeah.
And
And now Peter Thiel's saying the same thing. Now I guess they're taking turns on who's playing good guy and who's playing bad guy. But
yeah,
I remember Ken Wheeler theory apophasis, and well, wait, let me get to first. Let me go back to what you were just saying, because it reminds me of the idea of teraphim, like this worshiping of idols, and they would usually inscribe something on the metal in Hebrew and attempt to conjure an entity into whatever they put this metal object into, whether it was like a wooden statue or a body, even sometimes that was like a dead body. They would be attempting to conjure entities via this. So exactly what you're saying was attempted in the past, whether or not successfully, who the hell knows. But we even see things like the Bluetooth rune, which is a binding rune. I mean, that's on all of our phones. So you're absolutely right with that. And then if we get into what Ken Wheeler says, basically, as soon as they incorporate water into these systems, which they are doing now, he's like, you're just asking for tons of issues with disincarnated entities, like a consciousness of entities who have recently deceased and are still in the ether that's localized, re-embodying itself. And these entities, when they do this, are usually extremely violent and confused.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this is the wide body area network. They're talking about using DNA to not just store data, but to use the wide body area networks for energy harvesting purposes. So you're getting into Matrix territory here, where humans literally become the battery for their own digital enslavement. And then you have the idea of the ghost in the machine. So they have the Internet of all things, and of course, this sort of Saturnine, demiurgic, Cronian deity, satanic deity, if you will, right? The adversary, the purely rational and infinitely patient one, which is, of course, attributed to Saturn, because Saturn was on the edge of the classical understanding of the solar system, because it's the last planet you can see with the naked eye. So, of course, it's the edge of the clock, right? It's that thing which carries all of the other planets round. That was the belief, round, a bit like the sort of force, the tip of the arrow or pointer of the hand of the clock is carried round, right?
Mm-hmm.
From the edge, round, circularly around the clock face. So it is the literal embodiment of time, which is the embodiment of rhythm, which is the embodiment of the algorithm too, right?
Yeah,
As
and
like Dissident mentioned as well.
And these also, the like you're saying, the forces of electricity and magnetism that are connected in a way to source, which I don't think they're necessarily source itself, but they're fractals of source, which that's even like what the mystery schools would teach. Basically, you have lower level entities that are present in electricity or in magnetism. Like they
Exactly.
operate through these forces. And then if you add that now to, like we were just mentioning, you add water to that process. I think the thing is, I don't know if they're going to be able to transfer anyone's consciousness. And I think that's what they want to do.
No.
So
Yeah.
instead of that, because I think we're very like, our consciousness must be very specifically encoded to our physical body for some reason, and I don't think they're ever going to figure out why and how.
No.
But
But
if
this.
they're
Oh,
trying to
sorry.
trap it, I think they're trying to trap our consciousness and
Exactly.
keep us alive, because that's that second law of thermodynamics that I was just talking about the other day with, I think, Ronin and with Reagan, because we break that law, I think, because of our connection to source. We can do things like pick up a car off a child that we love because that energy comes from our soul, our solar source that we have. It's an energy that is basically an unlimited form of energy. So if you can trap us here, keep us alive, and use that energy to power your system, you have as long as you want then basically to figure out how to do your little experiment to transfer consciousness and live forever, which was never going to work, honestly, in my opinion. But you'll at least live much longer than you would have.
Well, it's the same. It's the same idea. You're totally correct, by the way. They can't trap consciousness. This is why they're attempting to control the mind, because they can't actually generate the thoughts, or which perhaps come from the spirit, or again that infinite form of energy, the
Yeah,
quantum state of consciousness. They can't control the quantum.
they mimic it.
They mimic it. Yeah, that's it. So it's the same with AI. AI is essentially a machine of mimicry, very advanced mimicry. Some AI less advanced, but they can't control consciousness direct, or they can't trap it directly. So you have to trick it into the box, which is, of course, look at the data centers. They're all boxes. All of the servers are boxes. And by the way, this is why you're seeing a dumbing down of people vis-a-vis the scrying mirror,
Well,
which itself
here's
is
the
a monolith.
question. Here's the question. Say they can trick the consciousness into the box. Can they then, whatever this sort of entanglement is,
Mhm.
like, oh, obviously it seems like our soul, the source of light that is consciousness within us, is entangled with the source. Is there any way they can break that entanglement and re-entangle us to something different? Like something within the box, as you say, the metaphorical box. Because
I
that would be a problem.
yeah,
And
that would be a
I
that
think
would be a big problem.
we might have spoken about this before.
My opinion is that I think consent is a universal constancy within the universe. So you have to consent
Yes.
to
Okay.
to to your own imprisonment. Essentially, it's the systems of power are established not physically, not by physical productivity or whatever. Ultimately, taxation and all of this is simply to reiterate your consensus, reiterate the consensus to um, revitalize one's consent to their enslavement. The taxation itself is, it's sort of a litmus test to see if one is still, you know, or you know, is the group in general, they are still totally enamored, or at least beholden to the system. Pardon. So I think consent plays a big part of that. But it's why they're making everyone ignorant, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
why everyone is getting pushed into these basically identitarian polarity, or an identitarian polarity rather, because
Hmm.
it's easier for the algorithm to deal with people that are very superficial, that are very narcissistic, facile, simpletons, that are locked into polarity, that are locked into very clear-cut, black and white, deterministic, thought patterns or thought forms. Moreover, as well, to destroy any potential contextual knowledge they could have. Basically, they want them to be tabula rasas, blank slates, because blank slates are easier to control, and they're easier to populate and assimilate informationally. With whatever you want.
But at the same time, they want them to still maintain that connection in a way to source.
Exactly, yeah.
But it's like that's going to be the fine line, because it's almost like I think if there has to be people within obviously these black nobility families that are bloodline families that have been around forever who know like that what light actually is, and that it's not like particles, it's more like a ether perturbation. If that's what it is, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. So it's like a disruption of the ether, but that means that these two particles that they think are separate actually are connected. Yes. So if you cut that connection, just because you think that you can cut that connection and have that one end of the spectrum, which they call a particle, sync with something else, really you're going to be cutting that connection from the source, and you're probably just going to wind up with like a shell of a person with no soul.
Yeah, the Kabbalah discusses the klippah or the cliffort,
and that's how they would. Then their whole experiment would fall apart at that point.
Yes, yeah. So they need husks, but they still need them to have that spark, if you will, of humanity.
Yes.
But everything. The field itself is essentially it's infinite in scope, and it is, again, it's the same idea as the dream. So within the dream, lucidity itself is a sort of dense form of consciousness. So as the alchemists saw it, all metal was a form of mercury. It was a different state of mercury, right? Everything was mercury in the same sense. Everything is potential within the field, and each frequency then perturbs that field, which produces a waveform.
Yes.
So basically, what we're seeing. Well, firstly, God is defined. You can define God. Well, you can't really define God, but you can get close to defining God with the idea of pure potential, undifferentiated and unmanifested. When that potential in its inert state, by definition, the seedbed of nothing, which from everything from which sprang everything. When that bifurcates, if you will, like the Y, it bifurcates from potential into an energetic disparity. That energetic disparity is the perturbance or the perturbation of the field. That perturbation of the field is the actualization of the potential. And eventually that actualization finds its way into, as in a dream, lucidity, right? Which is the very dense, dull, and glacial form of matter. But eventually matter dissolves and everything goes back, it contracts back into the potential, which is unobservable, by the way. It's as soon as you observe it, it collapses.
Collapses again, yeah.
Collapse, yeah. That's what quantum mechanics calls it, waveform collapse. So by the way, that's the perturbation of the field. The waveform collapse is that. So yeah, basically they're building their entire system on this premise.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? The way they might be able to pull this off is if they put everyone in a permanent dream state here. Like we'd basically be in a long sleep where we were having lucid dreams all the time and weren't aware that we were asleep.
Basically you become the similitude of the lotus eater from Homer's The Odyssey, and you go into this mindless state where you lose track of. By the way, we're already there. I mean, with doom scrolling, if you look at the
I mean, and that's the Black Mirrors are also they're diluting the souls of people as we go along, or they're taking the energy from the souls of people.
Look at the Devil Tarot card. Both of them, of course, and the idea with the horns and the satyr, like disposition or composure of the people, it's indicating that it's man as the animal as opposed to man as the nous or mind, and man as the spirit, right? Which is the other two aspects of man. So they're fully of the lower rungs of instinct, of cognition and consciousness within man. So they're chained loosely. They're chained loosely, meaning that they're in chains by their own actions, essentially, right? But
dude, it's so wild that you mentioned that, because that same video that I'd shared with the Gnostic about the one Steiner did, he mentions the satyrs and the basically as these and he also mentions these half bear, half goats that are in the astral, in the places where this dark, I think he called it dark Asian magic that had developed at a certain time, which basically he describes as them attempting to do exactly what we were just talking about before, conjure entities into wooden and metallic idols. And he said then in the astral realm you have these like satyrs, these half man, half beast, these creatures that are then created in the astral realm because of the actions that are happening on the physical. And eventually that starts to then trickle down into the physical.
Yes, and also as well,
super interesting. Yeah,
that bear symbolism links with Ursa Major, and of course Ursa Minor as well. And in the tail of Ursa Minor is Polaris, which is the cosmic center, and it's if you will it's the cosmic center. It's the Suastika, the good being. So basically, it's this idea that Jung stated where to reach for the branches to reach heaven, they must be rooted down in hell. That idea. Yep. So it's and it's like Dissident mentioned. Yeah, the chains are loose. Yeah, the chains are loose. Basically, the chains are constructed via links, and of course they're all interlinked. And these links are basically the instinctual anchor points, if you will, of those things that, again, like the current, like the river, just carry us, right? If we allow it. If we're not present in the moment, if we're not in control of our destiny, then these links, this loosh, these instincts will simply just carry us, and it will produce the chain. But they're chained, as you can see, to that monolith with the light round it. So it's almost like the black door. The whole thing's Saturnine, of course, but
it makes me think of just how necromantic, like how much necromancy seems to be involved in this system, because you get these then, especially in the occult groups, how they create these entities that are, what do they call them? These thought form entities that they've given energy to, that they also then, once
Archons.
they're, not the Archons, but Archons probably would be another form of this. But what the hell is the word? I'm like drawing so many blanks today. Not a meme, but a egregore. So they create so these like the left-hand path brotherhoods create these egregores that when their members die, apparently they just feed into these egregores, and apparently they hang around and then channel and get information from the dead members of their group. But when you have then something for these entities to incarnate, that then is going to become like it's going to become an even more like sort of parasitical system that's that's just consuming itself from the outside. Like it's a system of the dead.
Yeah, well, also as well, that's why, everything within the economy is fake. You have fake job listings. Of course, the money is totally fake. You're going to see that completely. You already saw it during the event of 2020, but basically money is not tied to either labor or production cost or anything like that. It's essentially just fictitious, and you're going to see it with the UBI. The UBI is basically going to come into being because you're going to have late stage capitalism, if you will, is going to, if you can even use that term, is going to get to the point where production costs are near as damn it to zero. So therefore, because of AI automation, and they're going to lose at the same time, simultaneously, they'll lose their customer base because they will no longer have workers, or they'll have reduced workers. Thus, those workers won't have a salary. Therefore, they won't have disposable income to thus continue to consume the products. So the way to get around this is you create basically corporate welfare, where you create artificial customers vis-a-vis UBI.
Yeah.
Now,
and then you let them play out like the gamified realities that they want to.
Like
that
Monopoly.
Are controlled. Yep.
You've won the board, but the only way to maintain your winning status is to indefinitely entice and persuade the through hook or by hook or by crook to get the losing players to continue to go round go. By the way, it's the same idea as the Bhavra Chakra of Yama, and getting people to continue round the wheel of samsara, the wheel of illusion. And funnily enough, I'm pretty sure the wheel of illusion sits upon this. Sits upon a sort of axial support, and then that is upon the sea of, God, I forget now. But again, there's various layers to that too. The same idea as the ancient AI and the Godhead and all of this. So this isn't just something it's not necessarily just a new idea. The ancient AI, it's a new way of putting, it's a new way of
it's a new term basically for an old idea.
Repackage. Yeah, it's a new term for an old idea. So yeah.
It's wild. It does start to even in my head. I know there's some films where this is depicted, where it's like where Earth is like an underworld, sort of filled with puppets that are kind of manipulated living and moved around by their, I guess, their copies or their whatever the hell is controlling them in the upper realms or lower realms. Basically, it would really be.
Here's this will blow your mind as well. Have you ever looked into a thing called the Sentient World Simulation?
Yeah, it's called something else now. It's called SEAR, I think, SEARS.
Yeah.
And it's used by the Department of Justice.
Well, here's the thing. So we have the egregores, right? And tulpas is another.
That's the other one, yeah. That's the other one I was looking for before.
So the egregore comes from, of course, the Greek word Grigori, which means the watchers, right? And we have Shem Yaza and all of this. Potentially linking to the demiurge and the ancient AI, right? The ancient architect of this all. But anyway, the Sentient World Simulation. Now, the event of 2020, when we were all, well, we weren't all, but, people were Was it a way of putting this that probably won't get this video taken down? They were administered the needlecraft,
Mm-hmm.
which potentially was filled with nanoparticulates, which
Mm-hmm.
permitted the biological system to more easily be connected with the telecommunication systems.
Mm-hmm.
So the biodigital convergence. Now, if we assume that to be the case, then after lockdown lifted and people were flung back out into the world, once they had been, of course, dosed with this, excuse me, what occurred was that the sentient world simulation had its own clone of you.
Digital twins.
Yes, exactly. The sort of Gemini twins or the Piscean twins as well. And from that, it essentially it took the data, the real world biological data that you were generating through the nanoparticulates, the artificial sense organs in your body now,
Mm-hmm.
administered through the hypodermic needle, and it translated those to the towers, which then translated it or relayed it, to the data centers, and then the data center translated it or relayed it into the sentient world simulation, and it will allow them unparalleled access and unparalleled knowledge and prediction capabilities to
Yep.
see every single potential of
Yeah.
their policies and how to get the agenda.
And also, if you add to that too, right after everyone got that, they were still in, like you said, lockdown for a while, which was beneficial for those wanting to collect data because you have them separated from everyone, even their family at times, by at least 6 feet. So you can more readily make sure that the data you're getting is from them and is accurate, which is probably why they wanted everyone in their homes for as long as they did. And then once they had what they needed, they let them out, and then they got collected data outside of the home.
Do you notice even after the needlecraft was administered, they still had the lockdowns? Do you know why? Because that was the state of that was the control state.
Yeah.
Because with any data, you need something to compare it to that's neutral.
And that's why they let some of us not get it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's another reason as well. The pure
because you need 3, as you said before.
Yeah.
And then
this
also
is the Pythagorean theorem. Yeah.
There was one other thing I wanted to mention when you said that, which was I might have lost it. It was what was the last thing you said when you were mentioning the walking around, collecting the data? Dude, my mind is drawing so many blanks.
The sentient world simulation, the seer, they have created a sort of cloned avatar in this simulation. Well, even Harari states it. No.
This is what I was going to say. So eventually, like, if they believe that this sort of merging with artificial intelligence is going to be beneficial for them, what they're eventually hoping is that, exactly like you're saying, the sentient world simulation can basically predict almost anything by running these various processes almost in real time and figure out the probability of certain outcomes. Now, if they think they can merge with that, if you really think if that did work, the possibilities would be almost unfathomable. Like, you could essentially have a intelligence feeding your mind information that would allow you to dodge a bullet based on the probability of where a person was going to shoot.
Retro causality. So basically, if you look at the pyramid essentially is the idea of it is, well, firstly, it is the pentacle. If you draw out the pentacle, which is the 5-pointed star, and you connect all of the all of the points together, you will generate a pyramid, but you'll generate it from the perspective of you looking up the pyramid.
Yep.
So basically, the idea is that we are in the lowest cosmic, we're in the lowest, densest, dullest, darkest cosmic circle, known as, of course, Earth, right? Why is it called Earth? EARTH. If I recall correctly, Roth or Wrath or Rith within Hebrew, I think means place or, a sort of a torturous state, if I recall correctly. And EA is obviously the Akkadian for Enki, which is the Lord of the Earth.
Also, it's primordial matter too.
Yes. It's also pronounced Ya, by the way, in Akkadian. The EA is pronounced Ya. So we have the Yahweh connection there too. So the earth is the place where the Lord of the God of this world, as the New Testament states, the Lord of the earth, Yah or Ea or Enki, tortures, if you will, in its souls and extracts Lush. Now, Lush perpetuates the cycle, but also, what do you do when you are, applying some sort of stimuli against a target within a study? You're trying to generate data. You're generating the wisdom, the Chokmah, the Achamoth, the Sophia. You're generating that because that not only informs you of your target and your subject more, more precisely, but it also maintains the experiment as well, because you're maintaining this constant, sort of branching out of, we found out this, let's find out this then from that. And it's endless, this endless pursuit of knowledge. But one thing to mention is that, oh God, sorry, I've just lost my train of thought, man. What were you mentioning?
Isn't it insane that how that keeps happening to both of us now? Because that never happens to me, and it's really bad right now with the train of thought. I'm like losing words that I say all the time. But I was mentioning Jesus Christ, what was I just mentioning now?
Oh wow, Jesus, we must be being attacked by the demiurge or something.
No, it was basically saying that if they think that the merging with AI for them is going to be actually possible, that based on probabilities that this thing would be able to run in real time once it's connected to their physical entity, whatever they're in at the time, they would be able to dodge a bullet.
So this is the idea of retrocausality. You're looking up the pyramid. The pyramid itself is this funnel, right? It's the psychic funnel. It's the same idea as you posted with that illustration, the web. So basically, if you were to shine a light through a hollow pyramid, right, it would, of course, the light, the one source would produce this this projection, or this disparity, if you will, of light throughout the pyramid on the square base. If you were to then, let's hypothetically state, if you were to then pick out the singular threads or rays of that source of light, think of those rays or threads as a single simulation, a single universe of one of the many multiverses created by the, ancient AI, right? For the purposes of data collection or Lush collection, right? If we understand, right, that the system that they're attempting to create is the same notion as that, just on a very, a far smaller scale, right? where they will, of course, they'll create one simulation the now, which will affect the real world, or what we perceive as the real world. Will they not then create another simulation to affect the simulation that affects the real world? So on and so forth. Because this will all be generated and maintained by AI. So the
And-
AI will go through multiple layers of checking and optimization for efficiency's sake, for, of course, the human architect or creator, because that's its prime directive. And it will affect perhaps us as now biodigital beings, you know?
See, now here's where the idea that there might be simulations within simulations could break down, and it could be, would it actually be efficient or not to like in the way that at least that someone like Elon Musk presents it, or Thiel presents it? Would it be efficient to actually create a simulation with semi-conscious or somewhat conscious or partially conscious entities within it, and run out a whole entire history in which I'm guessing a very quick time for that entity? Or would they just need to make copies of us, like our digital twins, and then put them in, which those would not be conscious? So that's kind of where are we in a simulation of a simulation? That might be where it's like a little bit, we might not be in as deep as we think in Dante's Inferno right now, because it seems almost impractical that would have happened as many times as some people say it might have.
Yes, I agree. We might not actually be in the simulation, but the same rule would still apply. That you see
It would still affect
simulation
us.
where
It would still affect us heavily. Yes.
and,
Because there'd be no way to actually, it would almost be taking away free will.
oh yeah, absolutely. But you would still. This is the issue. You would still have the illusion of free will.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's the same idea as the sum of the remainder of an imbalanced equation in the matrix, and the way to affect that is to essentially create the illusion of choice, which itself is the regulator of the matrix through the mother of the matrix, the oracle. So the oracle itself, the oracular machine, is the AI, but something to mention as well is that the system itself, when it's creating these massive data centers, and it's creating all of this infrastructure, this is going to take quite a bit of energy to maintain. So one reason they would want to, well, this is the reason they're creating artificial wombs, right?
Yeah.
And batteries of them, right? Literally, there's plans in the Netherlands and patents to create facilities where you have these artificial wombs that can create each facility can create 30,000 synthetic humans a year. Why would you need that? And of course, as well, we have the mostly Israeli domiciled companies that were setting up these, fleeting Ancestry.com websites, right?
Yeah,
Of course,
yeah.
that was an entire false pretense. It was to get your genetic data. Why
Yep.
do they need that? Because firstly, they're going to be genetically hacking people. And then secondly, they're going to be literally cloning people. It'll be like that Ewan McGregor film from, I think Scarlett Johansson was in it too, from 2005, named The Island. And it's not quite for organs or anything like that.
Well, you can store data on DNA, so
You can, but you can also generate energy.
yeah. So it's both.
In the
There's
wide
so
body
many
area
things. There's so many things. I mean, it's like,
that will perpetuate the system. That will perpetuate the simulation.
yeah.
The sentient world simulation, or SEER. So which will affect obviously reality itself, and it will maintain this homeostatic system, which is what the cyberneticists were after. the system of autopoiesis, which is a system of pure self-regulation, a system that literally maintains itself ad infinitum.
Yep.
Yeah.
This page I brought up too kind of gets back into some of the things you were mentioning regarding the totems and the, I guess basically, what was some of the other stuff? I mean, you could just see what it's talking about when if anyone here wants to read it while they're watching. I mean, it's talking about basically these constant just bombardment of seed images and different ideas, keeping a person's consciousness in chaos, so they can't really get a grip on reality. And at that point is where this ingression of alien forces, which I think would then be more so the dead or the lower level entities, where they start to fuse to the soul of man, and you get the beast system basically.
Yeah,
it's exactly what we're seeing.
Another thing to mention, by the way, I'm still to do a video on this, but in the Zohar, in the Kabbalistic, the primary Kabbalistic text, it lays out a fairly precise. I mean, you have to look into it, and again, this is all hidden in 4,500 pages of mostly pure mystic nonsense, right? Arcane nonsense. But once you delve into it and you sort of demystify a lot of this, you find a lot of direct quotes discussing what is really going to be what will be entailed with the entire tikkun olam, which is the rectification of the world. That's what the tikkun is: the rectification, the repairing of the world. And anyway, and the timeline is we are 214 years from the sixth millennium, Anno Mundi, which in the Anno Domini calendar is 2239 AD. So on the 29th of September, on that nightfall, 2239 AD, we will pass from the fifth millennium to the sixth millennium, Anno Mundi. 66 years after the sixth millennium, Anno Mundi, the King Mashiach, the King of the world, of course, Islam would know him as Al-Masih al-Dajjal, Christianity would know him as the Antichrist. So the 66th year of the sixth millennium, 666, the King of the world will appear. 7 years after that point, all of the kings of the world will converge upon Rome, which is another word for Esau or the West. And the worldly king, the Messiah, the Mashiach, which by the way is an Egyptian term, but it refers to the oil of the crocodile, which was used to anoint the Pharaoh. The reason for the crocodile is it's the green dragon. The green dragon is a Saturnian entity, and you can see that within both alchemical tomes and the Hermetic vision of Poimandres, which is Greek for the shepherd of man. Again, it's a Saturnine Cronian figure of time, and the Ouroboros is another idea surrounding that.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of the kings will converge. Prior to this date, two king wars will begin in the north, a bit like the Russo-Ukraine war, and two kings will be destroyed, perhaps NATO and BRICS, right? The East and the West. And then the King Mashiach will utterly eviscerate Rome, along with all of the peoples that have converged on it from all over the world, vis-a-vis arrows of hellfire, as the Zohar claims. Those are missiles, right?
Mm-hmm.
We would understand them as. And then after that, we get into the seventh millennium. And I forget now, I think it's 600 years after the seventh millennium. The gates of wisdom will be opened. This is the lunar gates, by the way. You see it for the Bhavra chakra. The moon tarot card as well. It's the gate. It's basically the Boaz and Yakin, the gate which forms the frame, the portal the entrance and exit way to and from this realm, right? And when you view it that way, the moon is not a satellite of us. We are a satellite of the moon from this ritualistic, symbolic point of view. The moon controls us, and then, of course, the moon is controlled by Saturn. I think we were discussing in another discussion with Bush Whisperer that so the moon is the regulator of the mundane. It has a 30-day cycle. Saturn is the regulator of the cosmic cycles, the larger cycles, because it has a 30-year orbital cycle. So you have the 30 there, right? Obviously combined, the two of them combined create the 6. So it's the triangle plus the triangle, the male triangle plus the female triangle together, or the phallus and the chalice, or the womb, which form the hexagram, pardon, or the Magen David, as it's also termed. And so anyway, it discusses that the gates of wisdom will be opened and the waters from the deep, or from the waters below, from the abyss, will mingle with this world. So basically what it's discussing there is that the digital abyss, if you will, the blackness, and the dweller of the abyss shall merge in with this world and shall control this world directly. And then it states not long after that, in the 7th millennium, again, this is mirroring the days of creation, heaven and earth will be recreated once more.
Yep, and I think that's exactly what it's saying here in these few paragraphs that I had, basically.
The reset.
Yeah.
The reset of the Matrix. And it states once more, which means...
See, this fuse of the antimatter and matter, which is through the ingression of alien or demonic or lower level forces at the Dathian gate of the abyss, causes a great explosion, basically. And this illuminates into a totally brand new...
And the Dat is the connection as well. So that's...
I mean, this is even mentioning all... Yeah, like it's literally... And such is the process of... This shouldn't say thought. This should really say world generation, really.
Yeah. Well, it even states once more. So what it's implying, pardon, by that, I guess, phraseology, is that there have been many, many, many cycles like this before. In fact, even states it mentions that each of these cycles occur within 6 steps, which are 6,000 years, right? 6 millennia, which of course links with the year 7,000. So what it's basically discussing is that everything in this world is reiterative. That it's almost a simulacrum. It has the same structure as a simulacrum, as a a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. It's the same idea, by the way, as the Amuru or Amarutu, literally the bull calf of the sun god. That's what it means in Sumerian. That's where all of this Lord idea comes from, and that's the son of the sun. So the son of the son of the son of the son of the sun.
Exactly.
It's the same notion.
And even this right here, this highlighted, that ritual of the Mark of the Beast. Ritual infers exactly what you're saying. It's not the first time. Because to be ritualized means it has to be repeated.
Yeah. Yeah, it says ritual literally comes from the Latin word ritus, which is like a custom.
Yep.
It's something that's customary. So you only get customs if it's been done before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But what do you think, brother? You think that's a good place to wrap it up?
Yeah, I'm actually going to have to head to college now.
I know.
I'm
about to have to take the girlfriend over to work in a minute, anyways. But I thought that was a great discussion. I'm glad Ronin joined us too. Reagan, if you're out there, my bad, brother. sorry I was running late. Hopefully next time he can join us as well. And anyone else who wants to join, just let me know. Next time we do a discussion. But yeah, no, thanks for coming on, bro. That was fun.
No, it's all right, man. Yeah, it was a really fascinating discussion. We covered a lot of ground, so yeah.
Really, really, really enjoyed it, brother. Anyways, get off to school, and we will talk soon, man. And tell everyone they can find you at SilasSpeaks 3301 on YouTube.
Yeah, on YouTube, Odyssey. I no longer upload to BitChute now, but you can find me there. You can find my old stuff there. Rumble, and I'll have a new book coming out soon, The Golden Age of Saturn's America. I'm just waiting on it getting formatted, and then the artwork will be done, and that will be published. So yeah.
Awesome. And I'll add the Ronin experience, the link to the description below too. So awesome. All right, brother. Let's talk soon.
Bro. Take it easy. Have a good one, man. Bye-bye.
You too, man. Later.